thanks to everyone who's been following this series about how to mix live music. I'm glad it's helped so many people during these last few years. Of course, more recently, live streaming music performances has become more popular, and for many people, it's been the only way to experience live music for a while. And with a selection of digital audio and video equipment, it's much easier to set up than it would have been just 5 years ago. Building on the theory and techniques I've taught during the previous 24 videos, I'll give you some tips for creating a good live stream mix. We're doing pretty much the same things for our input channels with regard to gain, EQ, and dynamics. But we're going to have more creativity with the stereo panning. And we'll need to pay much closer attention to our output levels and our master bus compression. The main and obvious difference between mixing for a live audience and a live stream is the listening environment. Rather than being in the same room as the band and the sound engineer sharing the same speaker system, the audience are now in their own homes or offices, possibly with small screens to view and small speakers or headphones to hear. For a sound engineer to do an effective job of creating a good sound for the audience, they need to be in the same situation as the audience. At a live event, the sound engineer wants to be in the center of the audience so he can mix the best sound to suit them. For a live stream, the engineer needs to find a mixing room similar to a lounge at home, and it needs to be as quiet as a typical home too. The engineer should be isolated from the live sound. Otherwise, you'll find that the louder sounds in the performance room will be quieter in the live stream, as you won't know how to compensate for that. But you can't send the engineer too far away, as they need to react to the performance in real time. A live stream is usually delayed by between 10 and 30 seconds. If the engineer can only hear that, all their adjustments will be too late and they will miss any quick changes. For success, the live stream mix needs to be created in the same building or campus, but in a quiet environment. That's why digital mixers with audio networking are the best solution. You can carry many channels a long distance with a tiny cable. Yamaha's TF mixers, like the TF3 we've used all series, have a Dante option with the NY64D module. That can link with additional mixers and I/O boxes like the TIO 1608D to share channels and carry all the audio you need around a building or group of buildings. In that way, you can have your main inputs and outputs on the stage, one TF to mix the sound for the audience and another to mix the live stream sound, all linked with regular network cables. You can also use Dante to carry the final audio mix from TF to the computer used for streaming. Use the Dante Virtual Sound Card app, which is available from Audinate, the inventors of Dante. It is compatible with just about all streaming software. Once your mixer is set up with your streaming equipment, you must match the audio levels. Audio level management is the most important job when managing the live stream sound. Many in the audience will be using small speakers and won't want to keep changing the listening levels throughout the broadcast. We need to provide a consistent and comfortable level throughout the event. Thankfully, TF mixers have a built-in oscillator. Find it in the monitor menu and route a tone to the stereo master. Before you switch it on, make sure all level controls are at a comfortable level for listening. You don't want any sudden loud noise. Then, gradually turn up the oscillator level to find the maximum level the live stream can handle without distorting. Hopefully, you can go all the way to 0 dBFS, the maximum allowed by digital audio equipment. Ideally, the maximum level of the mixer will match the maximum level of the rest of the live stream system. If you are not sure, make a test stream and log in to listen to the broadcast on the second device. It will be delayed by a few seconds, but you'll be able to hear how it sounds. Find the maximum allowed level and then never exceed it. You don't want to distort the sound for the listeners. Remember the previous video about output compression? We can use the comp on the stereo master as a limiter. Set the attack time to minimum and the release time to around 300 milliseconds. Out gain to 0, ratio to infinity to 1. Try a medium knee for a slightly smoother limit and set the threshold to the maximum you can reach without distorting the sound. Now you can turn off the oscillator and start to construct your live mix. Check the sound on headphones and on studio monitors with a reasonably flat response, like the Yamaha HPH and HS series. Each viewer will be listening on different equipment, so you want to use something that sounds fairly neutral by itself. Hopefully, you'll be able to stream in stereo, in which case you can start panning each instrument and voice more freely. Remember, at a concert, much of the audience aren't in a good position for hearing a stereo mix, so you have to be quite reserved with the panning. Well, now, most listeners at home should be in a good place, so feel free to pan creatively. Remember keeping the balance we discussed in episode 14. If you pan something left, pan something else right. And keep a solid and consistent central core to the mix. At this time, you may notice a timing difference between the audio and the video. Vision mixing equipment tends to take longer to process than audio, meaning the sound reaches the streaming encoder before the picture. In that case, you'll need to add delay to the sound. In the TF mixers, we can use the matrix for this purpose. Remember from a previous episode, we can send the stereo master to the matrix and then send the matrix output to the live stream instead of the stereo master. The matrix channels include a delay function, and the time can be set by number of frames. First check with your video colleague which frame rate is used, and then set that in the console preferences. Then set the number of frames to lip sync audio with video. I would expect between 2 and 8 frames to be a suitable value in most cases. Finally, let's talk about mixing levels. What should we be aiming for? Well, remember, many listeners will be using small speakers at a reasonably quiet setting, so we need to provide a smooth and consistent levels at all times. If there's a mixture of speech and music in the program material, we will need to match the levels of speech to music closely, which you wouldn't be so concerned about with a large PA system. Always keep your eyes on the output level meters and try to stick mostly within a 10 dB range. If 0 dBFS is your maximum, you don't want to be too close to that for long. Otherwise, the streaming service may apply extra compression or gain reduction to your mix. You don't want that to happen, it will degrade the sound. So try to keep output level meters lit between -20 and -9, sometimes going higher for a short peak and sometimes lower for a pause, but mostly bouncing around in between. You may need to do more real-time fader adjustments to maintain this than you would with a live audience mix, but it will help you to maintain a smooth and comfortable sound for the listeners at home. It's much like preparing a music mix in a studio for release on radio. You could have 100 or so fader adjustments per song. That is not unusual. Employ compressors on some of the inputs, if you like, to smooth the sound, particularly for singing and speech mics. But don't be too abrupt. You need to keep some dynamic energy in the mix. I would often use a compression ratio of about 3:1. Attack set to 0 and release around 100 milliseconds. I would use a mid, knee, and threshold to catch the loudest quarter of the words. With the TF series, you also have the option of routing your inputs to a stereo aux first, to use as a subgroup. Then route that to the stereo master. This technique allows you to apply a compressor to the whole mix, smoothing everything together. It can be an effective tool for handling the varying levels in a musical way. In that case, I would recommend to use an attack time of around 20 milliseconds, which will keep a punchy sound to the music. And keep the ratio gentle, no more than 2:1. And set the threshold to shape the loud passages in a fairly subtle way. Remember, you still have the limiter on the stereo master to catch the unexpected peaks. Now you should be able to create a smooth and steady mix, while still making it dynamic and realistic for the viewers. Though for even more realism, try setting up a pair of microphones for ambience towards the back of the performance room, and then blend them gently into the mix. It could be even more effective than a digital reverb in providing atmosphere and making the sound seem like it belongs to the picture. If the audience at home sees a band in a big open hall, they will expect to hear a big reverberant sound. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoy all the challenges that mixing live music for live streams can bring. If you haven't yet seen the rest of this How to Mix Live Music series, find the playlist and follow the previous 24 episodes. I'll see you then.